The great thing about Ethos is community. And the great thing about Ethos is the holistic approach to solving some of the world's biggest challenges. I was reading a book called Grain by Grain by one of our speakers who you'll hear from tomorrow. And I was reading that book, it's Bob Quinn. I was reading that book right at the time that Deb and I decided to move from Montclair, New Jersey, where we had lived for over 25 years, raised our kids, and decided we want to move to someplace more rural and have a garden. Somehow between that and now, I have a 43-acre regenerative farm that grows organic, regeneratively raised grains. And I met the Ethos team through that, right? And so as we were looking for property, the 3 acres we were looking for became 5 acres, the 5 acres became 10, and now we have 43. Now, while I am not proposing that everyone go about and basically take your entire life savings and spend it on a farm the way Dr. Weiss and I have unwisely done, what I will say is it's been one of the most gratifying experiences of my life. And my wife and I now produce most of the food that we eat during the summer. The rest of it comes from here, okay? And in addition to that, we've been Dr. Weiss's patient for over a year. So I'm speaking of personal experience about how this can be incredibly transformative. I was never very heavy. I've been a trained athlete my whole life. But even as a trained athlete, I'm running faster with a lower heart rate now. I've lost 30 pounds under Dr. Weiss's care, and my cholesterol went from 235 to 150, all in about 6 months, with no medicine, just by eating plants, and just under the direction of the man that you're going to hear from next. It was a very big change in life for Deborah and me. This has all happened over the last 4 years. But all of us have the power to do what we can individually do. And you'll hear that message again and again this weekend. It's about making personal change to the extent that you are able to help move the needle in a better place for your health, for the health of your community, and for the health of our planet. So without further ado, who has very rapidly become one of my best friends in the 4 years I've known him. One of the truly most beautiful human beings I know. He reads, he writes, he plays piano, he sings, he runs a farm, and he's truly trying to help us save ourselves and the planet. Dr. Weiss.
We're going to hear a little bit more about this, but he is a next generation farmer. Doesn't only play beautifully, but that music came from a farmer. I'm here to talk about food as medicine. I started my journey wanting to be a healer, so I applied to medical school. And the admissions committee always asks medical students that one question. And whether you get into medical school, whether you get in or not, is determined by your response. And the common response by the medical school applicant is, I want to heal people. That's the standard response. And so it was my response when I applied to medical school. The first 2 years of medical school is spent, well, in my day, it was between stacks of dusty books. Books probably aren't there anymore. More computers, but in labs with dead bodies, and I spent time with dusty books on the desolate streets of Newark late into the night, in laboratories with microscopes, and so this goes on for 2 years. There's no access or connection to living patients, and so you can imagine how in abeyance, you know, you're holding your desires for the time when you get into the hospital, which is the 3rd year, and first lay hands on a patient. And so the day before this was to occur, on the last day of my 2nd year, as I'm entering my clinical years, the 3rd and 4th, we're called into a lecture hall in Newark, a New Jersey medical school. This vast place, and in my usual position at the top of the lecture hall in the last seat, I see a professor coming on wearing a long white coat. And he makes the following pronouncement. He says, you know, the first 2 years you've been here, you've been behind microscopes and learning equations and physiology and pharmacology and drugs. It's basic sciences. But now what you're going to do in the second 2 years is you're going to learn to apply that, the basic sciences, to help people. But I want to let you know something. We can help people, but doctors really don't cure much of anything. And I remember that moment when I heard that, and I said, what? Because I went to medical school to be a healer. And the professor went on. He said, that's right. If you think about it, of all the diseases that you've learned about and what you're going to see in the next 2 years of medical school, there's very little that doctors can cure or alleviate. Yes, most infections. We've developed antibiotics for that. And then there are a couple of things that surgeons can cut out and make go away, like, oh, if your appendix is about to rupture, they can cut it out. If you have an infected gallbladder, they can cut it out. You know, if you have a cancer or tumor and we get it early enough, we can cut it out, and then you'll be okay. But he said, if you think about it, 90% of the time, all the things that doctors do is just manage chronic diseases. We can't get rid of them. We just manage them for patients with drugs, machines, surgeries, and he went on to list all of them. Diabetes, clogged up arteries, heart attacks, strokes, kidney failure, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, heartburn, and I almost passed out because I went to medical school to become a healer, and I had a crisis in that moment. And I left the lecture hall in a daze because I didn't know why I was there. And I came back the next day, and I went into University Hospital in Newark and began my rotations, learning how to treat diseases with drugs. And as time went on, I learned about more and more drugs. I learned about more and more operations, and such was my life. I went to a university training program after I graduated to become an internist at George Washington University Hospital in DC. And I completed that. And after I graduated, I was ready to get on with my life. And a couple of months after I graduated, my father called me and told me he was diagnosed with end-stage metastatic pancreatic cancer. I came from a large family. There were 6 kids in my family. I am number 4. And although a lot of us are doctors, I'm the only primary care doctor. This was devastating to me. We took him to the best cancer hospital in the world, and he was given, 30 to 60 days to live. It was very advanced. He had developed some severe abdominal pain just a few weeks before that. When we took him to this best cancer hospital, they told him that he could have some chemotherapy, which was 5-fluorouracil at the time, but it had an 85% no response rate and a 15% chance that maybe he could gain a few weeks, but that's it. So we took him home and prepared for death. And I didn't know what to do with him because I wasn't taught what to do. So I went down to the Fair Lawn Public Library and just started reading in the library. And at this time, alternative medicine was becoming the rage. And there was a shelf with all kinds of wacky things, which I started to pull out. It seemed very foreign to me because I'd been trained to give people drugs, surgeries, and hospitals. And I came across one book, and it was a book about whole plant food diets. It was written by Michio Kushi, who is the leader of a specific kind of plant food eating. And in this book, there was a testimony of a man who had had end-stage pancreatic cancer, metastatic like my father, and had cured himself. This man, by the way, his name is Arnold. He just died actually a couple of years ago. I'm talking about in the 80s this occurred. And he founded the University of South Carolina School of Public Health. It's called the Arnold School of Public Health. You can go visit it. And he reversed his stage 4 pancreatic cancer with a whole food, plant-based diet. I brought this home to my father. All of a sudden, the veil of darkness lifted. He said, I'll do it. We took him to see Michio Kushi in Boston. He began what I considered at the time the most severe way of eating I could ever possibly imagine. This did not seem human to me. And my mother was the foot soldier. Everything was thrown out in the house. Aluminum was thrown out, got cast iron. And my father, and all of us here, or many of us know what a plant-based whole foods diet is. This is much more severe than that. My father was not allowed to have any fruit. Okay, he was not allowed to have any nightshade plants. He was only able to have cruciferous greens, some root starches, brown rice, buckwheat, and some other things. And an amazing thing happened. Within a few days, his severe pancreatic cancer pain vanished. And as many of you know, pancreatic cancer can be one of the most painful cancers there is. His abdominal pain went away. A week later, he went back to his law office. 2 weeks later, he was running. 3 weeks later, he was lifting weights. 3 months later, we did a CAT scan on him. It showed 1/3 reduction of his major tumor masses. 6 months later, 50% reduction. 1 year later, we went back to this renowned cancer hospital and met with the head of the department. And when he saw my father walked in, it is as if he had seen a ghost. And wide-eyed, he asked my father, "What are you doing here?" And the reason why we went back is to see if there is any maybe new developments in treatment that were more effective. And when my father started to tell the doctor that it was kale, it was brown rice, it was, a wall descended immediately in front of this department chairman. He flipped the subject immediately and started talking about the chemo again. And I knew at that moment I would change as a physician. I was going to be a different kind of doctor because I saw what had happened. This was not made up. I'm a realist. I didn't understand. I myself was shocked. I didn't understand why it was happening, but it happened, and I knew we weren't lying. And so I went home. My father lived, instead of 1 or 2 months, 18 months. And the important thing is, the cancer eventually overcame him because it was so advanced. But for 17 and a half of those months, he was working in his law office in a poverty-stricken neighborhood of Patterson, which was his great love in life, helping the local community. And for most of that year, he thought he was going to live and survive, and he had hope. And that's what plants did for him. So I decided that's what I want to do for other people. I had moved home to take care of him, help my mother take care of him. After my father passed away, I moved out of the house into my own little apartment, and I was unpacking my stuff, and my medical school diploma from Newark came out of a box. And I started looking at it. And on the old New Jersey medical school diploma, there's a golden embossed seal, like a sun rising. And in the center of this seal is the image of Hippocrates with his staff of Asclepius. And as I was looking at this, I realized, who the hell is this guy? No one ever taught me about him. I learned about drugs, I learned about machines, I learned about operations. No one in medical school taught me. So I went back to the Fair Lawn Public Library, and I found out that his credo was food is the most powerful medicine. I found out that way. That's why I've entitled this presentation as Food is Medicine. Food is medicine for the patient. Food is medicine for the community. Food is medicine for the land. Food is medicine for the planet. Food is medicine for all of these things. Let's start with the patient, because I'm a doctor. A lot of those diseases that professor talked about that were not reversible, I found out they are reversible. It's not true. And we reverse them on this farm every day. Here's an example of a case report of MS, right? You have to take immune modulating and suppressive drugs because otherwise, well, what's going to happen to you? We have a number of MS patients we've taken off their drugs, and their drugs are now plants. They're whole plant foods. This is a 31-year-old male diagnosed with MS in 2015. He was on conventional treatment with steroids, interferon, and Tecfidera, which is an immune-suppressing drug. He had severe side effects and just could not tolerate living. That was an opportunity for us because he was just hating life to begin with like that. So it was an excuse for us to take us off that Tecfidera because it gave him so many side effects. We replaced that with a diet of whole plant foods. Within weeks, his symptoms began resolving. A couple of years that he's been on it, we have documented shrinking of his lesions in the brain and the cervical spinal cord. Those are the lesions that cause disruption of nerve transmission. He's reversing his MS. This is Tony Bayasek. Tony, are you here today? So what we love about Tony is before he was having such bad symptoms, he couldn't even exercise. Just within that year, he did a Tough Mudder event, which was this required extreme physical exertion. And today, he's doing triathlons. Food is medicine for the patient is being taught through our Next Gen Physicians program. Medical students, they wouldn't know this. I didn't know this. It's not taught in medical schools. A place like this at this time is one of their only hopes. There are other people in our plant-based community like Dr. Clapper, many others who are trying to promote medical education from that standpoint. We offer the world's first that we know of rotation for medical students, interns, and residents to an organic regenerative farm so that they can come here and learn about food systems, regenerative food systems, and their power to reverse disease. This is not taught in medical school. Here's a picture of some of the students we've had. Today, they began with us as seniors doing rotations, and today they get credit for this from Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. Figure that, right? To come to a farm and to learn about this, medical schools give them credit. This is a poster board of what we call the 30-day challenge or 30-day detox. It's hundreds of patients that have reversed on a broad basis of illness and diagnoses their diseases over just a 30-day period. This was accepted for presentation at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine last year, and now we are putting it out for publication in a major medical journal. This is food as medicine. Food is medicine for the community. You know, New Jersey is one of the wealthiest, I think second wealthiest state in the nation per capita, but about 10% of our population is food insecure. They don't have enough to feed themselves, and especially feed themselves in healthy ways. Food is medicine for everyone in our community. We are working with our urban centers in Newark and beyond to create programs to introduce whole plant foods into these areas so that these communities can experience the same regenerative powers. And I hope we'll be hearing more about that later. One of our board members, who is Saul Batista, who was raised and lives in Newark and who went to medical school, will talk more about that. As part of the Ethos Farm Project, connecting this farm, which is about 50 minutes away from one of the poorest cities in the United States, is one of our critical missions. Because we can lift up that city, the city of my birth, which is the Paterson, New Jersey, the birthplace of the American dream. Trenton, Camden, all of these places can be served by food as medicine. You have some nice pictures here of our farm market, one of Saul's programs teaching about whole plant foods in the city of Newark, and a previous farm days with everyone enjoying the speakers. And I hear Cory Booker's going to be in the house tomorrow. So he is our beloved senator. Here you see him running with Saul in Newark, and more pictures of the students. Food is not just medicine for people. Food can be medicine for land instead of poison for land. That's a main thing that this farm is trying to do, to regenerate this historic land. When we got here, this farm, you know, for those of you who've been on the tour, it's a 300-year-old farm. It's one of the oldest continuously working farms in the country. This farm was the breadbasket of the colonies of the United States in this valley. Its soils were historically extremely fertile. They still have world-class soils in them. One of our partners, aside from Princeton and Rutgers and the Rodale, is the Rodale Institute. And we are, through planting methods, which if any of you want to come on our tour, you'll find out about that. We are working to restore the soils, because living soils make living food, and living food makes living people. This was the director of the Rodale program coming out to do 200 core samples of our fields. Now you have to remember something. The reason why the neighbors came off this mountain and took this land, they knew it was under a prairie. This was a rare eastern prairie, and everybody knows that prairies have very valuable soils. But over centuries, sorry about that, the soils became worn out through pesticide use, monocropping, GMO corn and soybean. And when we got here, although these fields were still some of the most productive in the nation, at about 225 bushels of corn per acre. That's high. That's equal to the best Iowa corn soil. There's nothing in the soil. It's completely dead. So that food was being produced through chemicals. And food like that cannot help human beings. This is that field today. Actually, this is that field 9 months later. After decades and decades of Roundup, GMO corn and soybean rotations, the first spring that we stopped doing that, this emerged. And this was particularly touching for me because these dandelions, we had never seen a dandelion ever, because herbicides were constantly applied to the land. And then they just materialized overnight, like millions and millions of them. And they were brought here by the Pilgrims when they came over on the Mayflower. These are not native plants. And usually, we raise an eyebrow on the farm when plants are being introduced, when we see them popping up all of a sudden en masse, because oftentimes, they're invading our environment, and sometimes we can't get rid of them. But these were so beautiful because they have tap roots. They go and disimpact the soil way down. And then what happens is they do their job and then they leave. They're gone. They were there for a couple of years. You can't find them anymore. That's part of a living ecosystem. Food is medicine for our planet. For those of you who came on the tour to see what has happened when land can be revitalized by restoring these native plants, we've seen endangered species which have not been noticed by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection in years here, within 2 years of restoring their habitat. And here you see some of them. One of them is on the state endangered species list. It's that bobcat that you see. That's a male bobcat prowling this past winter in the warm season grass fields. And for the first time, he has a mate. There was a female. We got them on camera, and the male. And they're back here. And this is our old farm road. This is the road we walk down. If any of you are up for another tour tomorrow, going past those fields, those are the young warm season grasses. Food is medicine in all of its forms. And using food as medicine, we can change this planet. We will change this planet. We have to do it together. Thank you. I'll take questions for anyone who has them.
Do you feel that a whole food plant-based diet can reverse most diseases, specifically ALS?
I know that a diet of whole plant foods, and especially combined with all of the other lifestyle behaviors, can reverse almost all illnesses, but not ALS. Not ALS at this time. Nope. There are a few that we have not been able to overcome, and that's one of them.
How do you convince a doctor to prescribe less medication? Because I'm on a lot of it, but I'm going to go to True North. But anyways, how do you do that? Because she's with the whole diet thing. I told her I'm going to try this thing, and she's like, oh, that's great. But every time I go, I wind up with 1 or 2 more medications when they come out.
That's an excellent question. The problem with most of the medical community is what you saw in my story about medical school. They were taught to be chronic disease managers. They are not taught this. They don't know. It's not that they don't want you to be well. It's the only thing that they know. So every time you go, you will be given medications. What I learned from my father's story is no medicine trumps food. None of it. So what I would say to you is there are a lot of ways these days where people can access help outside of a doctor's office. I mean, people access help here like that because we're equipped to do that with coaches, and we take you by the hand and when you lead you, but there's so many opportunities. Just go. Just eat whole plant foods. That's all you have to do. Not animal foods, not plant foods that are all ground up and extracted and turned into dust or squeezed into oil. Don't do that. Just eat whole plant foods all the time, and your diseases will go away.
Before changing careers to sound person, I worked in a nonprofit for many years. Our main goal was to supply food for the ones that couldn't afford. One of our issues were affordability and sustainability, mainly because we wanted to motivate our clients to move into a healthy diet. The problem was sustainability because they didn't have the means to either constantly be purchasing fresh produce Also, it wasn't affordable. How can we, as society that are trying to move forward, trying to get our planet better, and your organization, how can we have a better outlook with this and help, or how is your organization helping both affordability and sustainability?
Spreading the message is key. 99% of the public does not know this. They don't know it. They don't know that food can be medicine for our planet, for us, for communities. They don't know it. That's why your being here is so important. That's why trying to raise money to teach doctors this from New Jersey Medical School and the other medical students who come here from all over the country is important. That's why teaching farmers this is important. And our leaders, AKA Cory Booker, will be here tomorrow, and he gets the message. He understands. So he is trying to change things on a national platform for us. So I think that building consensus through a mass movement is what we need to do, and we are doing it. Every day that I turn around, the movement is growing. The movement is growing.
Dr. Weiss?
Rich Roll can tell you that.
If we could simply change the school lunch program to be whole food plant-based instead of what it is now, imagine the power of that. And that's affordable and subsidized by our dollars. The dollars are out there. We need to work collectively to make sure our leaders divert them to the things that will actually do good instead of the things that will make people sick and harm them. I've got another question here. Sorry for interjecting that.
Hello, Dr. Weiss.
Hello.
Having a great day here with everyone today. Question about the urban farming and urban awareness. Obviously, is first just building awareness. I know we have community gardens in Newark. What is your thought about how to create sort of en masse, like large scale? Is it hydroponics? Is it what is the idea or the strategy thought around creating whole food plant-based growing in urban areas?
New Jersey is a good place to be to answer that question. We're the fourth smallest state in the country, but we're the most densely populated. And we're also wealthy. We're the second wealthiest state per capita. However, 10% of our people have nothing to eat. So there are these disparities over the place between wealth and poverty, things to eat that are healthy, things not to eat. Programs that I spoke about earlier, which is the Next Gen Farmers Program, seeks to address that. So we do not have the farmers necessary in order to grow food for our population. And that's why the Next Gen Farmers Program is educating farmers, especially urban areas, and that's why we are working with Saul Batista, who I mentioned, and our urban areas to raise a new generation of farmers from these areas and to train them on this land. You have to remember, as you drive through Long Valley, there are thousands of acres of permanently preserved prime farmland just in this valley. New Jersey, right, the chemical depot of the world, has more preserved farmland than any state in the country as a percentage of its total acreage. Through our farmland preservation program, and this is one of the farms, we've preserved more than 250,000 acres of prime farmland. And so our Next Gen Farmers program is to get kids from Newark, to train them in regenerative methods, and to give them this land so that they can grow good food and bring it back to Newark and feed the population.
Yes, hi, Dr. Weiss. Thank you very much
Hello.
for this event. It's been wonderful so far.
Well, thank you for coming.
You said something that was kind of stark to me, that commercially grown food is basically worthless after you showed the dead soil. So many people have home gardens that used to be backyard lawns, that used to be, you know, something else. Are they capable of growing nutritional food? Because everybody seems to be happy about their gardens. Is there something like a limited way they can be regenerated? So
Absolutely.
that can be better than they are now?
You know, during the darkest days of World War II, we didn't have enough food to feed our population. And so within 2 years, the Federal Victory Garden program managed, just in people's backyards, managed to supply 40% of all the produce in the United States. People growing in their backyards. 2 years. It's possible. You know, during World War II, we don't have the massive amounts of chemicals and poisons that we do today. Those were just about to arrive on the scene. We always encourage people to grow their own food in their backyards, but to do it safely, you want to analyze your soil, make sure it's not contaminated. Here in New Jersey, as we are finding out across the nation, there's a problem with persistent chemicals called perfluorinated alkyl substances, which are coming from Teflon and other non-stick substances. So maybe getting the soil tested and you know, using regenerative techniques. Yes, you can grow your own food. Just get the soil tested. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Weiss.